thank you, and I apologize for the confusion here in the beginning, but Celine provided an excellent overview of the active implementation frameworks, and what I would like to do is to focus really on the key components here to talk about fidelity and the critical role of fidelity. And as Celine already mentioned, this is not a common aspect of research, but it needs to be. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. The first thing, fidelity really is a very common, let's see. I was trying to mute the thing. Fidelity has many definitions in the literature, and so we think that fidelity really comes down to these three things. Are you doing what you intend to do? Fidelity should tell you that. How do you know that you're doing that? Well, your fidelity assessment should do that for you. And does it make a difference? So that if you have high fidelity, you should have better outcomes. If you have low fidelity, you would have lesser outcomes. So are you doing what you intend to do? How do you know? Does it make a difference? So we will talk about those three as we go. So Celine already described the implementation drivers framework, but the key point here is that fidelity is the link between implementation, innovations, and outcomes. So this is an important thing to keep in mind. Fidelity is used in two ways. So fidelity is an outcome of the implementation drivers used effectively. Celine was just describing that a moment ago. So if we're developing the competency of the teachers, we're supporting them with the schools and the organization beyond the schools. And if we have the leadership there to support all of this, then we will be able to have high fidelity use of innovations in schools. Celine, I noticed you're standing up. I was wondering if I needed to do something different. No. But keep in mind, fidelity is an outcome here. This is why we have the implementation drivers, so that teachers will be able to use the innovations as intended. So we'll back your three questions. The other use of fidelity is an input for using innovations effectively. So high fidelity use, then that means you're going to have consistent uses of the instruction in the classroom. And if you have that, then you will have reliable benefits to students, which is what we all want. So this fidelity plays these two roles. That's why it's the link between implementation, innovations, and outcomes. But on the right-hand side, you see that high fidelity use of the drivers and high fidelity use of the innovations, those two things together combine to produce the desired outcomes for students and for others that you're interested in. So fidelity, when you read the literature, keep in mind, what are you reading about? Are you reading about fidelity as an outcome or fidelity as an input? And because it's used both ways. But we'll talk more about that as we go along. The fidelity of the use of the fact that we have the high fidelity use of the drivers, well, how do you know about that? And that is where we have assessments of the drivers. We have a way to assess the fidelity of the use of the drivers. There's a responsibility analysis, and then there's assessing drivers' best practices. And so, in both of those, you'll notice Celine and her colleagues have produced a French language version that's available on the AIRN website, as well as the sources that Celine has. So the first question in the fidelity, what do you intend to do? How do you know? Does it make a difference? Well, what do you intend to do? Well, you want to make use of evidence-based programs, and any of these evidence-based programs are by definition new ways of work. That an innovation is an innovation. So in every case, this new way of work is different than the old way of work. And it will be more or less a poor fit then with what practitioners are doing, what the school is supporting already, and what the external systems are funding and supporting with policy and so forth. So knowing right from the very beginning that if you're using innovation, you're going to need to deal with this poor fit between the innovation and existing practitioners and organization and systems. So there are two approaches that you will read about and know about already from your reading to how do you adjust then when there's this poor fit. And one view, and I must say, sadly, this is a popular view, is you adapt first. How do you tailor, how do you adapt innovation so that they better fit the school, how they better fit the place in which the practitioners are going to be using it? So the first thought is that you change the evidence-based approach to instruction and change it so that it is a better fit with your old system of instruction. And that view is the popular view, and there's a lot of discussion around tailoring. We think the more productive view is the fidelity first view. And that means that we recognize that an innovation is a new way of work, and therefore practitioners need to change how they're doing their instruction, and schools need to change how they support the teachers doing their instruction, and the system has to adjust as well. So the fidelity first view says that fidelity is critical. It's the critical link between the innovation and accomplishing what we intend for students. So let's look at this a little bit. So what do we intend to do? So in instruction in classrooms, we want to make use of the most effective instructional practices. And John Hattie in 2009 published a book, and I hope you are able to access this book. But he did a meta-analysis of meta-analyses. So he went one step beyond a meta-analysis. So this is a massive review of the education literature over many decades. And out of that, there are many things in the book that he pointed out were important for improving student outcomes. But we looked through the book and found the 7 things that were instruction. This is what teachers were able to do in the classroom. So provides a clear instruction, demonstrates instructional tasks, and so on. In that column, those are the 7 things that we've identified that this is what teachers could do in the classroom every day. In the second column, this is where the operational definition. So we took each of those things and with some effort from the book and also with colleagues, what does that really provide clear instruction? And so we have a definition for that. And then we have examples. So provides a clear instruction. Well, the teacher states what students should learn from the instruction. The teacher provides a reason why the instruction is important, and so on. So each of these things, there's an operational definition, which fits into the usable innovation part that Celine just described. And then there are examples that we use. But you can see how this, when you think about the implementation drivers triangle, this is what is used then to teach teachers how to provide highly effective instruction. We also took, and so those are the first 4 of the 7 on this page. On the next page are 3 more. But we took all 7 of these then and developed the observational tool, instructional supports, and systems that we fondly call OTIS. But this is an observation tool. So if this is what we're teaching teachers, this is what we want them to do. How do we know? The second question for fidelity, what do you intend? We intend them to use the 7 things. How do you know? We're going to take this then and turn it into a fidelity assessment measure. And so the how do you know part, we developed a 10-minute classroom walkthrough. So observers would walk into the classroom, spend 10 minutes observing the teacher providing instruction, and then they would note on a 3-point scale, 2 fully in place, 1 partially, 0 not in place. So pretty simple scale. But the observers would note, are the teachers doing each of those 7 things or not during that period of time? So only 10 minutes, and the observers would be able to go to attend many classrooms during the course of one day. Very important, because this involves having judgments made by the observers about fairly complex teacher behavior. So during the preparation of the observers, we practiced with them until they reached 80% agreement with the trainer. Inter-observer agreement, I'm sure you know about. So, but we practiced that. And then during the time that we were actually doing the observations, for 20% of the observation, randomly selected, we had 2 observers, not just 1 observer. We had 2 observers go to the classroom independently for the teacher behavior, and then we would compare to see if we were maintaining the 80% inter-observer agreement. So this is a continual test of the quality, because when you look at data, you want the data to reflect teacher behavior. You don't want the data to reflect the observer behavior. If the observers are not observing accurately, then when you look at data, you're not sure whose behavior are we looking at, the teacher or the observer. Here are some data. 43 schools and 1,059 classroom observations. And this is all a baseline. So no intervention has been used in 43 schools with respect to teacher instruction. And across the bottom are the 7 things: clear instruction, demonstrates tasks, and so on. And the average over here, or the total on the 0, 1, 2-point scale. And we set, prior to this, we set the benchmark at 80%. So we wanted a score of 1.6 or better for instruction in every classroom. But again, this is a baseline measure. So this just tells us where instruction was. And this is about 60%, not 80% for the total. But notice that provides feedback, adjusts to student responses, provides opportunities to respond again. Those are the things that were pretty good already. They were approaching our benchmark of 80%. The things that were low were the things that count for student learning in a very profound way. Providing clear instruction. what is it I'm trying to teach you, and what is it I want you to learn, that was not as high as we would like to see. Demonstration of that. If it's a math problem, you work it out on the whiteboard, or whatever it is that teachers use these days. It was an old blackboard with erasers and things back in my day, but there's a demonstration of that. And then engaging students in paying attention to the demonstration. And those were fairly low. That really provided direction to us then in terms of what it is we needed to focus our teaching and our coaching and our assessments on. But the data were very, very helpful. But we want teachers who are at the 80% level or better. So here we are again. If we want this fidelity assessment that, like the Otis data, if we want those data to be 80% better or better, what do we need to focus on? Well, we need to focus on the implementation drivers, because high fidelity use of the drivers leads to high fidelity use of the innovations, which leads to the results that we want for students. So let's take a look at how this can be accomplished. And Celine talked about how to scale up things. So we have the teachers, we have students in the classroom. We want the teachers to use effective instruction practices. We want them to use them with fidelity, and we want consistently good outcomes for students. We don't want some students to benefit some of the time. We want all students to benefit all the time. And so this is a problem. You notice it says interaction-based education, because as you know, teachers are teaching, but the students are responding. And depending on how the students respond, that affects teacher behavior. So that's a fairly complex interaction that happens in a classroom. So that just adds complexity and interest to all of this. So here we are then working in state education systems, and the data I'm about to describe collected between 2015 and 2018. In each state, on average, there were 2,400 schools, 350 school districts, 15 kind of administrative regions in the state. So that was the average. So if we want all the teachers in all of those 2,400 schools to be making use of this, how can we arrange that? How can we make sure that this is going to happen with good outcomes for students? Well, as Celine talked about, you need an implementation team. And the implementation team, I'm not sure the language here, but at the school level, in the United States, they call them buildings as well as schools. So that's why we have both names there. But the implementation team needs to be there at the school level to support teachers as they're interacting with students, making use of these effective practices. That's what this whole part is about. But there are 2,400 schools in each of these 4 states. So we need 2,400 implementation teams. Well, where do those come from? The next thing is you need to have regional and district implementation teams. But what do these people do? These people create more school-based implementation teams. That's their job. So at the building level, they're working with teachers and students. But at the next level, they're building implementation capacity in the form of these school-based implementation teams. Well, we still have lots of regions, 15 regions and 350 districts in each state. So how are we going to have enough of them? Well, we need to have a state implementation team. Maybe in your case, it's a federal implementation team. But their job then is to create the regional and district teams. The regional district teams create the building teams so that the building teams can support teachers making use of these evidence-based approaches with good outcomes for students. So that is how to solve the scaling problem. And the thing that makes this work is the active implementation frameworks. The active implementation frameworks are used at the federal level to create more implementation teams. That's their goal. That's used at the regional and district level to create the building teams. That's their goal. It's used at the school level to help to really support teachers then working with students so that you can get the good outcomes. But in all cases, you have the active implementation frameworks there as the methodology that you're using in order to accomplish each level within that system. What you're looking at there is an implementation infrastructure. So this is the pathway to create systemic change. And we're using this in a school example, but we are actively engaged right now with federal adult probation and parole in the judicial system here in the United States. The same thing that I'm describing to you for schools is what we are doing with the federal probation and parole. So how do we know? That's the next question. How do we know that we're accomplishing these things? Well, at the teacher-student level, we have Otis. We have the 10-minute walkthrough that we just talked about a minute ago. That we want the teachers to be using those 7 critical skills, and we have Otis, the observational tool, then to as a measure of that. At the building level, the driver's best practices assessment. So if in fact the school implementation team is doing its job, then the driver's best practices data should reflect that. We have district capacity assessment and a regional capacity and a state capacity assessment that we had to create. And all of these are available on the website. And whatever you need that you cannot find, ask Celine. She is the person who can find anything, and if you can't find it, we will find it for her. So these are the measures, though. How do we know? So let's look at some data. And these are data for one state. This is one of the 4 states that we were working with at the time, and it's just the first 36 months. We have the state capacity assessment, regional, district capacity, driver's best practices, and then Otis. So let's take a look. So here's our 80% that we're shooting for. And so here's the state capacity assessment. State capacity assessment is done 2 times a year, more or less 6 months apart. But you notice that 20% was the baseline measure, didn't improve very much, then improved a lot. This is fairly common in the data that we see, but never quite achieved efficiency, never quite reached that by month 33. But here's the capacity at the state level being developed. Now, of course, why do we develop state capacity? So we can have the regional capacity. So here's the regional capacity. Took a little while for the state implementation team to start working. But when it started working, then the first of the regional centers developed, the regional implementation teams. Again, fairly low baseline, but over the next several months, they improved, and finally, by month 33, they were at the proficiency level. But why do we develop the regional ones? We develop those so that we can have the district capacity. So the district capacity assessment, again, starting fairly low, but then improving with the support of the regional capacity or regional implementation team. So they got better. Why do we have that? So we can have then the supports for teachers at the school level as assessed by the driver's best practices assessment. So what we find is, yes, it took a little while to get the district implementation team functioning, but when it did, then the driver's best practices assessment data improved. And why did we go to all of this trouble? We went to all of this trouble so that teachers would get the support that they needed to interact more effectively with students. So this is where the Otis data come in. And this is on the, again, the 0, 1, 2 scale that you saw before. So now that we have the district implementation team functioning and the school implementation team starting to work, you know, see that, then the first assessment with Otis about what we saw for the baseline level in the previous data, around 60%. And then a few months later, though, with the support of the school implementation team, they were doing quite well. The teachers there were teaching using those 7 skills identified by Hattie. So it's one thing to say that you're developing teams, but it's another thing to have the teams actually function in a way that produces outcomes. But here is the outcomes. Here are just the state capacity assessment data. That's all you're seeing here. But starting in month number 1, when we started working with that state, and keep in mind, these are big states with lots of schools and lots of teachers and students. But the state capacity assessment is where it starts, and you notice it went up pretty well. And some of these have complete data over the full 3 years that are depicted here. But it does say that this is not just one state that you can do this. We've worked with about 15 states now, and we have, assuming this contract gets extended by the federal government here, there'll be another 5 years and another 5 states that will have data very soon. So this is a replicable system. This is something that, as Celine was talking about, you're doing it on purpose. You are assessing what you're doing along the way at each step, so you can engage in that plan, do, study, act cycle for improvement. One more thing about fidelity as a caution. These are data from the Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports. They've been working with schools and developing this very evidence-based approach to school discipline and reduction of students being expelled and so on and so on. But lots of data for the effectiveness of PBIS. But here are 5,331 schools and fidelity data in each of those schools over 5 years. But you notice that some schools started out with high fidelity and sustained that. Other schools started out with high fidelity and then quickly faded away with changes in leadership and all the other problems that occur. But this is just a reminder. Fidelity is something that you work for all the time. To be in those top 2 groups, 42% of the 5,000 schools, sustainers and the slow starters, it says. To be in those groups, those teachers, those principals, those educators, the people around those schools, they are working all the time to help assure that high fidelity is being achieved, that those implementation drivers are in place. So don't think about fidelity that, oh, well, we achieved it one time now we can move on. No, you assess it all the time. You're always using it to improve the next thing. So using fidelity data. And fidelity helps to discriminate between two very important things. Are you having an implementation problem? Excuse me. And if you have low fidelity and poor outcomes, what is this an outcome of? And until you have a high fidelity example of the innovation, then you can know, well, high fidelity, is that producing what we want? And if the answer is yes, then great, do more of that. But sometimes you have a high fidelity example and you're not getting the outcomes. But you're not able to answer the outcome question until you're able to produce a high fidelity example of the innovation itself. So fidelity, very critical. And if you have the high fidelity example and a poor outcome, that's an effectiveness problem. You don't redo the drivers, you redo the innovation. You redo the so-called evidence-based approach that you're using. So fidelity data are there to be used. A critical thing about fidelity data, and as in education, we learned this early on, that there's not universal acceptance of fidelity. But it really, really helped when we describe fidelity as an assessment of teacher performance. And it's there to provide constructive feedback to the teachers, but it's really an evaluation of the support for the teachers. Are the coaches providing effective coaching? Did the trainers actually teach the teachers how to make use of, for example, the dimensions on Otis? Are the principals and the school staff there really supporting the use of the innovation by the teachers? Are you using the feedback for quality improvement? So yes, it's an assessment of what the teachers are doing, but the real thing is that if things are not going well with the teacher, that is not a teacher problem. That's a school implementation team problem. And that is where we need to look at the quality improvement part of things. How can we train better? How can we coach better? Should we do fidelity assessments more often? And so on and so on. But if you don't have a fidelity assessment, then as Wyke says, if there are no errors, if you don't know about fidelity, if you don't know that fidelity is low in that school, there is nothing to learn. So fidelity assessment, here we are again. Are you doing what you intend to do? But that begs the question, what do you intend to do? Do you have a usable innovation that meets the criteria that we outlined earlier? How do you know that you're doing what you intend to do? And do you have a way to detect the presence, the strength of the instructional program? Do you have something like the Otis classroom walkthrough observation system to tell you that we spent all of this time and energy teaching the teachers to do this? Well, now, how do we know that they're actually doing it? And if they are doing it, does it make a difference? And so those three questions, as simple as they are, if you can answer those, then you are well on your way to making a dramatic change in education. And I will stop there. So thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak with all of you, and look forward to the questions.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I have one question. You said that low fidelity and poor outcome is due to an implementation problem, but is that because you think we have to test the effectiveness first and to be sure about the effectiveness, because if we didn't test the effectiveness first, when you have low fidelity and poor outcome, it can be an implementation problem and an effectiveness problem.
Good, very good question. Thank you. We can have an evidence-based program, evidence-based approach to instruction, but if we're not using it as intended, if we have low fidelity in the classroom, we're still not sure about the result. Why is this outcome as poor as it is? So the first thing we need to do is make sure that we are using the innovation, the evidence-based program as intended. So with high fidelity, then we will know that we are able to use the implementation drivers in the classroom and in the school so that teachers are routinely making use of the innovation as intended. They're making use of it with high fidelity. So, but if we don't have high fidelity use of an evidence-based approach, then and we have poor outcomes, we're still left wondering if we were to do this as intended, would we get the intended results in this school with these teachers? I hope that comes close.
So thanks, thank you very much for the seminar, and thanks to both Céline Pobel-Burtin and Dean Fixsen for stimulating presentations. In fact, at the very beginning of the presentation, Céline told that we know quite a lot in terms of effective teaching practices, and I thought, oh my God, I'm a sociologist, and well, I'm not really able to define what are actually efficient practices, and but now yes, I've noted the book by John Hattie on with the meta-analysis, in fact, and yeah, so I will go that way. So now it will be a very general question. In fact, I'm a sociologist, but at the very beginning, basically between 1975 and 1981, I was trained in psychology.
And you were talking about social psychology, and that's definitely one of the foundational pieces, and a lot of the interest is social psychology. And so, I mean, from Kurt Levine on to present day, we've read a lot of that. But what we have tried to do is to develop a general set of conditions that apply everywhere. And so education, we've spent 15 years and about to spend more there, but we've spent a lot of time with juvenile delinquency, with people with severe developmental disabilities. So there are many populations and systems that we have had the chance to work with. And so, and each of those has taught us something. The other thing we have really paid a lot of attention as we've gone from small things to bigger things, we've paid a lot of attention to complexity theory, chaos theory, some of the cybernetics and so forth that have been around, because they're looking at multiple factors being critical features at the same time. And how do you deal with that? Because in the systems that we just described, where you have everything from teachers in the classroom to the people who are in the Ministry of Education involved in the same system, you cannot afford to pay attention to just one thing. So so we've borrowed from lots of places, but we can't have 40 things that we try to teach people. We need to have that common language that Celine was talking about. What are the concepts? What's the language to describe that? How do you actually measure that? And those turn out to be pretty universal at this point. I mean, every new application we learn something else, but so far so good on that.
Merci Dean pour cette réponse.